Straight ahead, ballot secrecy? Texans have a constitutional right to keep their vote to themselves, but elections officials admit in rare cases the public may be able to figure out how someone voted. New trend, why fewer migrants are crossing illegally into Texas than the 3 other states along the southwest border, and what's next in the state's border security effort. Demand for power. ERCOT says the electric grid needs will nearly double in 6 years. What's driving this, and how are leaders responding? Good morning, I'm Jack Fink. All this plus leaders of the Texas Republican and Democratic parties discuss the November election. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics starts now. Hello and welcome to Eye on Politics, and happy Father's Day. Lots to dig into. Even though the Texas legislature is not in session, there were a number of key hearings this past week. And we begin with one question that's being asked at the Capitol and across the state. Just how secret is your ballot? Texas voters have the constitutional right to a secret ballot, but in some rare circumstances, the public may be able to figure out how you voted. This is being discussed after a conservative outlet called Current Revolt published what it said was now former Texas Republican Party Chair Matt Rinaldi's actual ballot. Rinaldi hasn't commented on this. This came up in the House Elections Committee hearing this week, and a clerk said this is a legitimate problem.
Ballot secrecy, it's real. Obviously, we need to fix it. That balance that we have sought between transparency and secrecy has now come to a head.
It's come to a head because Texas is very transparent about its elections, and last year passed a bill to release even more information publicly. What you may not realize is that images of ballots are public information. A state senator asked the state's top elections official about this.
Is that ballot image, is that record of that ballot, is that publicly available? And the answer to that is yes. Right now, it is currently publicly available with some restrictions.
While someone can't ask for your ballot specifically, the director of elections at the Texas Secretary of State's office told senators late last month that what is also public information is who voted, where they live, where their voting precinct is, and where they actually voted. In many counties, people can vote early and on Election Day anywhere in their county, not just in their home precinct. Experts say in rare cases, especially in smaller counties and in small turnout elections, people can use the process of elimination to figure out how someone voted and request the images of the ballot. For example, if you live in Dallas but you voted in Rowlett, that is tracked. And if you're the only one who did that during an election, your ballot could be identified. In another example, if you're one of only a few who voted in a precinct and everyone voted the same way for a particular race, people can figure out how you voted. So what's the solution? 10 days ago, both the Secretary of State's office and the Attorney General's office both put out statements telling county elections officials they need to redact personally identifiable information on ballots. Officials say a recent opinion from the Attorney General's office spelled this out.
The last 2 lines that make it very clear that election officials have the ability to redact any information, any personally identifiable information, not just on a ballot, but in an election record that can tie that voter back to their votes.
Since all this became public, one short-term solution is that counties will no longer release where you actually voted. That will make it more difficult to track how you voted and your ballot. The director of elections at the Secretary of State's office also suggested elections administrators could also take results in low turnout voter precincts and combine them with results from larger precincts. Lawmakers could also decide to make it illegal for people to reveal how you voted. It's not against the law now, but it is illegal for your employer or anyone else to bribe you or punish you for the way you vote. The questions over ballot secrecy come as election integrity has been a major concern and top priority for years by Republicans. Now to the southern border, where new federal statistics show the number of migrants crossing into Texas illegally has dropped below the 3 other states along the southern border. It's a trend that began in March, and statistics from U.S. Customs and Border Protection from April, the most recent month, show the numbers of people have shifted to the west. Texas had just below 23,000 people cross into the state illegally. There were just over 30,000 migrants who crossed into New Mexico, which is still regarded as the El Paso sector. In Arizona, nearly 37,000 people entered the state, and California had the highest number of migrants at nearly 39,000. Last week, the Texas Senate Border Security Committee held a hearing to get an update on the state's Operation Lone Star at the border, and this new trend came up for discussion.
You're seeing the deaths, cross-border deaths down. You're seeing the entries down. You're seeing the traffic move west. They're moving west because they're going to follow the path of least resistance.
Texas border czar Mike Banks testified that in December 2022, Texas accounted for about 60% of all illegal border crossings at the southern border. In January of this year, a much lower number. The Lone Star State accounted for about 29% of all illegal border crossings at the southern border. In real numbers, in December 2022, 130,000 migrants crossed illegally into Texas for about an average of 4,200 each day. This past January, that number dropped to just under 36,000 for the month, or an average of 1,100 daily.
I'm not waving a victory flag. A 516-day is still not good enough for me, but I never thought in 23 years of being on the border, with Texas owning 64% of that border, we always expected to see 60 to 80% of the traffic just based on the sheer size. But the fact that they want to go around Texas, they don't want to come here, it's been phenomenal.
The hearing comes about a week after President Joe Biden signed a new executive order that shuts down asylum requests at the southern border once the average number of daily encounters with migrants between the legal ports of entry reaches a certain threshold. The state's Operation Lone Star has cost Texas taxpayers $11 billion. In a recent interview with CBS News Texas, Governor Greg Abbott revealed the next steps.
We will be redoubling our efforts to add even more miles of razor wire border barrier, more miles of the border wall that we are building, more National Guard.
Here's what's on the ground already. Texas has put up 72 miles of commercial-grade fencing, 133 miles of concertina wire barricade, and 30 miles of anti-climb fencing. Governor Abbott recently showed off the state's new forward operating base in Eagle Pass, which will ultimately house 1,800 National Guard troops. It will have 95 buildings on its 80-acre site. The first 300 troops moved in May 31st, and the second phase took place in the past several days when another 300 moved in. In all, there will be 6 phases. Regarding border security, the Dallas City Council voted overwhelmingly to approve a resolution that condemns Senate Bill 4 by a margin of 11-3. The state law makes it a crime for a migrant to enter Texas illegally, who can then be prosecuted in a state court. The author of the bill, Republican State Representative David Spiller of Jacksboro, sent a letter to the City Council asking them not to condemn the law. Spiller told them there were a number of items in the resolution that were wrong and not part of the law. Dallas Police Chief Eddie Garcia told council members that SB 4 does not supersede the state law banning racial profiling.
We have met with the district attorney's office. We have met with federal partners. We have met with our racial profiling expert, Dr. Del Carmen, to ensure that there is a policy in place, if this were to pass, that no one in our city's rights are violated.
The resolution will have no bearing on the state law, which remains on hold while it's being reviewed by the Fifth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals in New Orleans. Coming up, ERCOT says the needs for the Texas power grid will rise even more than they first thought. What's behind it, and why did the lieutenant governor call it shocking? Then later, we speak with leaders of the Texas Republican and Democratic parties about the U.S. Senate race this fall, when Eye on Politics returns right after this. Welcome back to Eye on Politics. Now to the demand for power. At another hearing this past week at the Texas Capitol, ERCOT told state senators the number of megawatts needed to keep up with growth will need to expand in a big way in the next 5 years. Right now, ERCOT has a load capacity of 85,000 megawatts. In the initial growth plan from last year, the grid regulator for most of Texas forecasts the load capacity would need to grow to 110,000 megawatts in 5 years. But under the new plan outlined by ERCOT CEO Pablo Vegas, that number needs to grow to 150,000 megawatts.
which is a 40 gigawatt increase from one year to the next in the 5-year horizon. That's effectively almost doubling the peak demand of the ERCOT grid in about 6 years.
During the hearing at the Texas Capitol, Vegas explained why the state will need an extra 40,000 megawatts in load capacity in 5 years.
The Permian Basin alone reflects about 24 gigawatts of that growth. And to put that into context, that's almost the size of the Houston coastal region of the state of Texas. About half of that's electrification and oil and gas. The other half is a combination of green hydrogen, data centers, cryptocurrency, and other traditional industrial businesses.
Vegas said that's similar to the growth around the rest of the state, but that doesn't include oil and gas. In a post on X, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick called Vegas's comments, quote, shocking testimony. The 110,000 megawatts was already a big increase. 150,000 megawatts is almost double the megawatts we now have on the grid. I asked the Lieutenant Governor about this last December.
I was going to ask, what is driving this? Because Texas has been growing all this time.
Yeah.
And so what's changed? Is it all these large data centers that have moved to Texas? Is it Bitcoin? Is it, are they sucking up so much power that we can't keep up?
Jack, it's all of the above. We've added 11 million people here in the last 20 years. And the power, as you talked about, mining for the Bitcoin people, or just all the power, all the companies that have moved here, all the factories have been built. On top of it, just the people live in their homes and need power. So it's all of the above. But
Patrick pushed for a constitutional amendment that voters approved last year, creating the Texas Energy Fund. The state would provide more than $7 billion in subsidies for private companies to build new natural gas-powered plants to generate the additional megawatts needed to meet the expected power demand. The state says there are 125 projects worth $39 billion that would produce 56,000 megawatts. These projects will now move to the formal application phase. Lawmakers may approve another $5 billion in subsidies because of the newly projected growth. Aside from building more power plants, ERCOT and the Public Utilities Commission, or PUC, say the state will need to build more transmission lines. The PUC chair told senators the agency is also looking at a campaign to promote energy conservation for residential customers. The party has a new chairman, Abraham George, a former chair for the Collin County GOP. We spoke about how divided the Texas House is among Republicans, why he and others want to change the law and make it so only Republicans can vote in their primaries, and how they can secure a victory for former President Donald Trump and Senator Ted Cruz in Texas this fall.
Well, the grassroots are very activated. People are upset with the amount of money they have to spend at the grocery stores. They have to worry about, $3 gasoline prices these days. It was $4 and, almost $5 at some point. So all of those things are just encouraged and exciting for grassroots members to go out and knock on doors to their neighbors and say, hey, do you want this or do you want us, basically. So I think this is working out great.
The Texas House, the GOP members of the Texas House, very divided right now, very divisive. We had a very nasty, brutal primary fight. How important is it to change that, to unite the party so that the party can ensure that its goals are actually passed in the legislature?
Well, I would say the party is not divided. The different House members are.
Right.
Yeah. So this is
even
86
conservatives.
Right. 86
conservatives.
people, which is what we have, and we're thinking we're going to have 88 members this time around. So among those 88 members, there is some division, and it's based on who's going to be the speaker. It's based on do we want Democrats as committee chairs, things like that. It's not based on do we want free market society or limited government. They all agree on that.
And what about Dave Phelan? He, as you know, says he's going to run for speaker again. He believes he's going to win.
Yeah.
And so how do you see that playing out? And will you support him?
It's not about Dave Phelan or Tom or another person who's running, or it could be a bunch of people going to show up, and we got 5 months to do it. It's about where are we going to stand as far as the no Democrat chairs, where are we going to stand as the priorities in our platform. If that person actually going to do all of that, it doesn't matter who the nominee is. We can get behind that person. It's not a personality issue. It's just our principles is what we're worried about. It's a natural ask that the Republican Party is in power, and we ask that Republicans get to put on the committee chairs. It also means that we don't want Democrats to kill any of our priorities or our bills. Committee chairmanships are powerful positions in Texas House.
And another one of your priorities is to close the Republican primary.
Yes.
How would that work, and why is it important?
Well, today is an open primary state, so a Democrat can come and cast a ballot in the Republican primary or vice versa. We believe the Republican Party have the right to ask only Republicans choose our candidate for the November election. And I don't think it's too much to ask that only Republicans choose the Republican nominee.
You believe that Republicans will increase the number of members from 86 to 88.
Yeah.
So what races do you have in mind?
One is HD 70 right here in Collin County. It's one of them. There's one in South Texas that we're looking at. Those two are winnable races with HD 70 was a plus 11 Biden district, but with Biden doing what he's doing today, I think people are going to flip.
We also spoke with Monique Alcala, Executive Director for the Texas Democratic Party, about the presidential and Senate races and what their goals are this year.
I'm really excited that we're building a coalition that is incredibly diverse and that we're all rallying together enthusiastically in order to elect Colin Allred as our next U.S. Senate senator, and then also Democrats down ballot. We're really focused on ensuring that we have the infrastructure at TDP in order to support all of the volunteers and all of the state party leaders that we have across the ground, all across the Lone Star State.
Given the fact that President Biden is unpopular in Texas, he's underwater as far as his job approval, he is trailing former President Donald Trump in the polls, doesn't that make your job of getting Allred elected much harder?
I don't think so. Whether we want to admit it or not, the president of the United States has had over 40 months of job growth. He's also given Texans more than $120 billion to rebuild our roads, our bridges, our airports, all of our infrastructure, including broadband. He's forgiven billions of dollars in student debt, and he's worked to increase inflation, all while acting as one of the most progressive presidents of our time. So I do not think that it's going to be an issue.
The governor, as you know, after the primary runoff, said that he has enough votes in the Texas House in the next legislative session that starts in January to pass school choice or taxpayer-funded education savings accounts.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing about that? Are you going to try to block it, and if so, how?
I think that the governor should really take into consideration that Texans, including Republicans, as he saw at the last special session, that Texans overwhelmingly reject private school vouchers, and we're going to do everything that we can in order to ensure that our Democratic caucus is aligned. I mean, we showed that last time around, and we're going to elect more more people at the state legislature to ensure that we hold them accountable.
What seats do you think are vulnerable for Republicans that you guys are going to be going after?
Yeah, we have some really incredible young candidates that are running, particularly in Bexar County. We have Christian Carranza, who's running in House District 118. We also have Avery Bishop that is running in DFW and against Angie Chin-Button in House District 112. They're both running on a platform to fully fund our public education system, and we know that these are districts that are certainly winnable for us this year.
Friendly reminder, the full interviews are on our website, cbsnewstexas.com. Go to the Eye on Politics section. That's all for Eye on Politics this week. I'm Jack Fink. I am listening, and we are listening at CBS News Texas. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you again next week. Happy Father's Day once again, and happy Juneteenth this Wednesday.